But from what my experience, there's just nothing like a tom gobbling on an early morning and responding to your calls. It is the most remarkable thing, remarkable sound there is. These animals that we hunt and that we love and that we find grandeur and beauty and satisfaction in, they don't appreciate existing, they just exist. But as being made in God's image, we can appreciate and value our existence, which I think is really cool.
What is up, guys? My name is Tyler Pruitt. I am the host and I am the founder of the show, the Rise to Elite podcast. I first of all want to thank you guys for listening to the Rise to Elite podcast today, because if it weren't for you, the listeners, this platform wouldn't be able to exist. So thank you so much for choosing to listen to the Rise to Elite podcast today. The Rise to Elite podcast mission is to be a resource for people who love the pursuit of God, freedom, and the great outdoors. As part of the mission of this podcast, I want to be able to share the stories, the ideas, and the conversations around this idea of pursuing God, freedom, and the great outdoors. So I've been able to have great conversations with people like Travis T-Bone Turner here recently, Bud Fisher of Catching Deers, Adam Weatherby, and Jeff Danker. I've had all kinds of different conversations from people all across the country and really all across the world. So thank you guys for choosing to listen to the Rise to Elite podcast today, where you get to participate and listen in on some of those conversations around those things. If this is your first time listening to the podcast, I want to first of all thank you all for choosing to listen, and I appreciate you taking a risk and listening to the Rise to Elite podcast today. I know you're going to enjoy today's conversation. If you are a return listener, then thank you for continuing to listen to the Rise to Elite podcast. If you guys haven't already, then go ahead and subscribe to the show today. That way you don't miss out on any of the future episodes of the show. I do have a few announcements before we get into my conversation with Pete. First of all, as of this week, the Rise to Elite podcast is officially on iHeartRadio. I know a lot of people like to listen to podcasts through that platform, so we now have that opportunity to be able to listen to the Rise to Elite podcast on iHeartRadio. So make sure that you guys share that information. Make sure you guys share those links, and that would be greatly appreciated. So up to this point, we've been primarily on a lot of the main podcast platforms like Apple Podcasts, obviously, Google. We're also on YouTube. You can listen to the episodes there. You can listen to the episodes on Facebook. But now we're, of course, on iHeartRadio. Also, if you guys haven't connected with me on social media, you can find me at the Instagram handle at RiceKillEat, all together, all lowercase. And you can find me on Facebook at facebook.com/RKE All right, so that's RKE as in Rice Kill Eat Afield. So make sure you connect with me on there. Now, the Rice Kill Eat podcast is listener supported. So if you feel compelled to help support the Rice Kill Eat podcast, it would be greatly appreciated. And you can find a link for that down in the show notes of this show. All right, so listener supported shows, I mean, it's exactly what it sounds like. To produce an episode of a podcast, anybody that has ever podcasted before, or if you've ever considered it, you know that it takes time, you know that it takes effort, and it takes sometimes a little bit of money. So, or any support that you guys feel compelled to give, then I want to encourage you guys to go ahead and head down to the details of this show and check out how you can support the Rice Kill Eat podcast. All right, so today my guest is Pete Rogers. So Pete is a longtime outdoor writer. He's a photographer, a minister, and the host of the Christian Outdoors podcast. I was recently given the opportunity to be a guest on his show, so I want to encourage you guys to go and check out my interview on Pete's show, and it was a really fun opportunity. So we just kind of did a little bit of a swap here, where I was on his show and he's on my show. So be sure to go check out his podcast show, the Christian Outdoors podcast. So in today's episode, Pete shares his passion for hunting and the outdoors and what led him to merge these things, these passions, with his faith. So make sure you guys go check that out. So without further ado, let's go ahead and dive right into my conversation with Pete Rogers right here on the Rice Kill Eat podcast. Yeah, so that's kind of where I'm at as far as where I'm located in the state is right there on those foothills. Like you can literally see from my back porch, kind of right where the Appalachian Mountains start over here in Kentucky. So
Okay. Well, good.
yeah,
Yeah, I'm excited to. I was able to go with Patrick down to Alabama back in March, and do a pig hunt with him, and that was really exciting. I've never done pigs with dogs, and although I
Hmm.
love to hunt pigs, I know people call them hogs, but for some reason I can't stop calling them pigs. But it's the same thing. But I love to hunt pigs just about as much as like I like to hunt anything. And he told me about that, and I was like, man, I gotta go. And we had a good time down there. And I said, man, this Ironman Outdoors is really a good program, and
Hmm.
I want to get involved in it a little bit more. And so I looked on their website and saw a deer hunt in Kentucky, and got a buddy of mine going with me. We're going to ride up there the second week of October. I think it's the 14th through the 19th, so Wednesday through Monday, um, out there. And I don't know if you follow them on Instagram and Facebook, but they got some really nice bucks showing up on the cameras on that
Oh yeah,
farm.
yeah, they
Really nice
definitely do.
bucks.
Yeah,
Yeah, I've
this time
called
of
dibs,
year,
but I don't know if that's going to work any good.
it's gonna be hard to hold back on any of those bucks they got showing up. They got some good ones showing up there.
They do, because I know down here in South Carolina, 120-inch deer is a true trophy. I mean, we'll, across the state they'll get some bigger than that, but we just don't have big deer down here.
Yeah.
And on the properties that I hunt, I've been hunting one of them since 2001, and we know that there's just a genetic line that all the deer have short tines, 3 inches, 4 inches.
Hmm.
You can have a 10 point and the G2 will be 3 inches. And I mean, it's been that way for almost 20 years. And it's kind of frustrating, but at the same time, when you see something that's as big as you're going to get. So we go more by body age than we do by antlers anymore. Just if he looks like he's mature deer and he puts a smile on your face, and take him, you
Yeah,
know.
that's what I was going to ask. Is it? I mean, you we were just sitting here talking about Kentucky, how we can not easily, but we can see 160, 170 inch deer on occasion and have
Hmm.
some nice deer. So how does that kind of experience change for you down there in South Carolina, where may not necessarily have the same kind of antler growth, but as far as body size goes, you may see something that's a little bit more consistent.
Well, yeah, it's like I said, I've been hunting the same property for a long time, and so we uh we kind of know what to expect, as far as the bucks go. Every now and then during the rut, a rogue will show up that's a little bit better than normal on the cameras and stuff. And my brother-in-law a few years ago killed a 6.5-year-old, and he was a 9 point, and the longest time was 4 inches,
Yeah.
and he weighed 170 pounds. That's guts and all. Was and so that's about as big as they get. Every now and then you'll get a 200-pounder. I've
Hmm.
killed a few down there in the time that I've hunted, and I've killed a few 10 points and some really nice 9 points for down there. But body size, the does will go 100 pounds, and the bucks will go 145 is my average on that property. As far as average, and I think the biggest over there was like 190, and that was a very old, very mature deer, and I'm thinking he was actually living on the ag a couple miles away where there's tons of corn, and just roaming through on the rut, and I was able to take him. But we don't have big deer body or antlers, so if you want to get big ones, you got to go somewhere else. Typically,
Yeah,
yeah,
but still though, going back to what you were saying before, if it puts a smile on your face and it gets you out into the outdoors and gets you out hunting, I mean, you can't really beat that. It's if the opportunity is there, then absolutely
absolutely,
take
absolutely,
advantage of it.
and that's why and that's where when I have guests over, Tyler, they'll say, well, what can I take? And I say, anything that makes you happy. I
Yeah,
mean, if because that's for me, that's what I've been hunting. This will be my 42nd year, and so I've kind of progressed through the different stages of hunting. Where you just want to kill, 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 just to get some blood, some success. And
yeah,
then there's stages where you want to try different challenges and all this. And I like to hunt with every weapon that's legal. I enjoy all of it.
yeah.
But at this point, it's like I was telling a buddy who was down there this past weekend. We spent 4 days down there last weekend finishing up all the prep work, and I said, if I have to think about it, then I don't shoot them. It's almost an instantaneous thing when I see him and say, "Oh, that's a nice buck." Then I don't feel the least bit remorse, or I'm excited whenever I'm able to take them. And the same thing with does. If it's a mature doe and she gives me a chance, and I got either a pistol or a bow in my hand, I'm going to take her, or a rifle. I like it all. And People on my podcast have heard me say many times how much I enjoy pistol hunting. I got into that several years ago, and I really, really enjoy pistol hunting. And I've kind of started from zero of ratcheting up. Take something
Yeah.
first and get some success, and then kind of move up the ladder with being a little bit more selective. But I think I'm like a lot of people, is that when it comes to just getting meat, if it's a smaller buck, I'd rather shoot a doe because we got plenty of them.
Yeah.
um, and that's the advantage. We have so many does that I have 6 doe tags for this one piece of property and 3 buck tags, and so I can take 6 does and you won't even notice it on the population. It's just crazy.
That's crazy. So you mentioned pistol hunting. So how does that
Hmm.
kind of work? And what kind of caliber pistol do you use? I mean, do you use like a scope setup? I've seen a few guys do it before and never really had the opportunity to ask about it. So I'm gonna ask you. So
Okay, sure,
how's that kind of work
sure.
for you as far as the pistol hunting goes?
Well, it's the way I describe it in my writing is in my talking to people is it's exactly like bow hunting but a lot louder.
Yeah.
And what I mean by that is it is close. For me, I like to keep my stands, or if I'm going to pistol hunt, 60 yards and in. I don't hunt where I can see far. I hunt the same stands I hunt when I bow hunt, as opposed to my big open clear cuts and big fields when I'm rifle hunting. I'll hunt the thicker woods. I'll hunt the trails, the rub lines, things like that. And I have several. I like revolvers personally. It's just kind of a personal thing. And 44 Magnum is my go-to caliber. I've tested a lot through the years. I think I'm in my 15th year using a pistol or so. And yes, I do use optics. I'm 56 years old and my eyes aren't as good as they used to be. But more than that, if I'm in the woods, I can't really see the sights very well on open sights of any gun.
Yeah.
Because typically on a pistol, they're not illuminated like a true glow, and you can put true glow uh, sights on them. But I like scopes. I have scopes on some of them, and then I have actually red dots. I'm moving more to a red dot, and that's because again here in the South, our leaves don't drop to about Thanksgiving, and
Hmm.
so it can be dark in the woods at that early morning and late afternoon when the deer are moving, and I'm attributing it to my age, Tyler, is that as I get older it's harder to see those crosshairs. For some reason, scope manufacturers, when they make handgun scopes, they make the very fine haired crosshairs instead of the
Right.
duplex kind, and it's
Yeah.
written, and I find them hard to see, and so I've gone to red dots that I use, and I really like the True Glow micro dot. It's very lightweight, it's very small, easy to zero, and you can adjust the brightness on the dot so that it doesn't starburst. It's just a very fine dot, and I really like that. So I like the 44 Magnum revolvers, and with the red dot on it is what I choose the most. And since Hornady came out with that bullet that I can't pronounce, Lever Revolution, you know what I'm talking about?
I think I've
It's
heard
a
of it before.
Yeah, it's a 44 Magnum with a ballistic tip on it.
Okay.
So that you can and it is so accurate, man. It's 225 grain, and it is so accurate out of those pistols. And most of my pistols have 7 or 8 inch barrels on them. Like, I
Hmm.
really like the Taurus Raging Hunter. that's
Yeah.
that's one of my favorites, and it's a really great pistol. It's accurate, it handles really well, it's balanced well. I really like it a lot. And when you put those Hornady Levolution, again, I can't pronounce it, bullets in it, it's I feel very comfortable. I've taken pigs out to 80 yards with it, with a neck shot, and I'm very comfortable. I've taken deer. Most of my deer shots are like bow hunting. They're 30 yards and in because I'm hunting tight. You know,
Yeah.
so yeah. But I really enjoy the pistol hunting because you have to focus on trigger squeeze, what I call shot execution. When you're bow hunting, you have to really focus on not just aiming but shot execution, not
Yeah.
not flinching, or what do they call that, target panic, and squeezing your
Yeah.
release instead of
Squeezing it. Yeah.
punching it, following through with your bow hand, so you're not dropping it or raising it or anything. And it's the same thing I find with the pistol is you have to really concentrate on shot execution and to make an accurate shot. And that's what I like about it. I like that added challenge of having to really focus on the shot execution, you know.
Yeah,
So
yeah, definitely. I've always seen a few guys do that before, and I've always thought it was really cool just to be able to go out and take like a higher caliber pistol out and higher caliber handgun, and go out and
yeah,
be able to take a deer, be able to take a hog or whatever it is, and
yeah,
be able to do that. And it just seems like the the pack in and the pack out with the firearm is probably way easier because you don't have to worry about,
it
of
is.
course, carrying in a rifle.
It is.
But
It is. It is. And on those big guns, they make special holsters that sit on your chest,
yeah.
right in the center of your chest, and so it's balanced, and I think they call it a bandolier holster, and so it's balanced, and it's right there. It's out of your way. You got both arms, and so it's really fun. What I like to do is if you got a little light drizzle and it's a little bit chilly, to do
Hmm.
some still hunting with the pistol, because you can
Oh
move
yeah.
real slow and quiet, and you can leave the pistol in your bandolier holster the whole time that you're moving until you see something. Then you can get it out and take your shot, which is really fun.
Yeah, that's one of the tricky things about still hunting is, trying to keep track of your weapon without it bumping up against something, especially, with a bow or whatever, if it is
Yes,
raining, trying to keep it dry and everything. And that can be a little bit tricky. And that I can see how the maneuverability of a handgun would be, of course, obviously an advantage. So that's pretty neat.
it is. It is. I do want to say this to anybody that's listening about it though is it takes a lot of practice to be able to shoot a big
Right.
bore handgun accurately enough that you want to take an animal with it. And so I started with my Buck Mark 22 shooting squirrels. That's how
Hmm.
I started handgun hunting. It's a really accurate semi-automatic pistol. So I started shooting squirrels with it, and then I said, man, this is fun. So then I ramped up and got me the 44 Magnum after a lot of research. But there's other good calibers for anybody that's really interested. Anything over 357 is suitable. 357 is pretty small for a deer, but it is capable of it with well placed shot. I would recommend any 40 caliber, 41 Magnum,
Hmm.
the 41 Remington Magnum, the 44 Remington Magnum, or even I got a 454 Casull this year in the Taurus Raging Hunter, and I'm really excited to try it. It's the bullet's as big as your thumb, man. It's a it's a wallop. I'm excited to
Oh,
shoot it.
man.
I've shot it a lot to get ready for season, and that's what I'm going to hunt with. As soon as gun season comes in, I'm going to take that 454 Casull and the Taurus Raging Hunter and see what I can do with it. So, um, yeah.
That's great. That's great. Yeah. I'm definitely gonna look into that. I know here in Kentucky, as far as I know, I'd have to look at the rules again, but we're not able. It's not legal in Kentucky to use a handgun at the time. But I've seen some folks do that, and it's been pretty
Oh,
cool. So,
really?
yeah. So,
Huh.
what kind of things are you doing right now to kind of get prepared for the upcoming hunting season? We were talking a little bit before we pushed record, but hunting season's right around the corner. So, what are some things that right now that you are kind of working on as far as the preparation side goes?
Well, on the preparation side, I had to do a lot of mowing this past weekend. At like you said before we pushed record and started, our bow season's already open in some parts of the state, and gun season opens September 1. But it's a little bit too hot for me to hunt right now. So, and I had some other things going on, had some timbering being done on our property, so I had to wait for them to finish before I could go in there and do what I needed to do. But we have. A piece of property that has what we call rifle areas and bow areas. And so in my rifle areas, I had to go and mow the lanes because we get lots of dog fennel. Do y'all have that up there? Lots of dog fennel that
Yeah, we
grows,
got a little
and
bit. Yeah,
yeah, and it'll get 7, 8 feet tall.
yeah,
And so I wait till right before, usually July, the end of July, early August. But again, I had to wait for the timber guys to get out. And then I'll go in there and mow that stuff down so that we can see. And on some of our rifle lanes where we have some pretty long shots. And so I do that. And then in another area where we had some clear cutting done back in 2014. I think we had 30 something acres cut, but I only replanted 20 acres. So that left me 10 acres to play with. And Tyler, what I decided to do after talking with the QDMA and the Turkey Federation both is instead of planting it into a food plot, I decided to go with native warm season grasses and
Hmm.
kind of leave it kind of a CRP type thing here in the South. And I had no idea there was quite as much maintenance in that. I thought it'd be I thought it'd be the cheaper way to go, but I was so wrong in that. Because we get volunteer trees like crazy, especially pine saplings and sweet gums and a few hollies. And so we have to at least every other year mow the entire thing with a big brush hog to keep those saplings at bay in order for the grasses to be able to do what they're supposed to do. And now, when I say grasses, that includes briars and honeysuckles and
Oh yeah.
greenbrier and blue stem broom sage and all those things that are just naturally there. And so I've been seeing since again we did this in 2014, so it's been six. This will be my sixth season. Is that it's really thick now, and the deer absolutely love it. I mean, it is crazy how many deer will walk through this area where the grass is, I'd say, to the belly high to the deer, maybe just a shade higher than that.
Yeah.
It's almost like they feel like they're hidden in
Yeah.
that grass, and they just walk right through it, just like it's nothing. Whereas a manicured field, they're a little bit more hesitant to step out in. So
Right.
so what
You see
I
that a lot
so
with like soybeans and stuff too. I hunt primarily this time of year. I hunt primarily like over soybeans.
yes,
So like
yes,
whenever they're about shoulder high on the deer, like you can see, a lot of times they'll bed down in the beans, and then
right,
all you can see is kind of their head and their back, their spine
yep,
kind of
yep.
moving across. But yeah, it's just I guess it just gives them a certain level of comfort, and while
It does.
also offering them a opportunity to eat.
It does. And then when you're fortunate enough to take one, you better mark where you fell,
Yeah.
because I mean, you can walk right by him and not see him, can't you?
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Definitely.
You really can. But that's what I've been doing is I move some stands every year, even though we've been on the same property for a long time. Some stands haven't moved in 15 years, but other ones, as the topography changes again with some logging things and some things of that nature, the deer movement patterns change. And so for my bow stands, I shoot compound and longbow. Like
Hmm.
I said, I like to do it all.
Yeah.
I set my stands up close just in case I decide to take my longbow. I can get that 15-yard shot or that 10-yard shot. I don't have to take a 35-yard shot or anything. And so I moved some stands around to some new areas and got those situated and found some persimmon trees that were loaded with persimmons. And so I put some stands up close to that and put some cameras on it. I'm really excited about that. If you're in other parts of the country and not familiar with persimmon, it is a deer magnet in
Yeah.
September. I mean,
A,
a magnet.
a lot of the deer attractants, like the artificial and natural stuff, they'll have that persimmon scent and kind
Right.
of thrown into it. You'll see like apple and all kinds of stuff, but I've seen a lot of persimmon, flavored
It's
and scented
yes.
type thing too.
It is amazing when you see a persimmon tree, the deer that will just, I mean, it really is. And the thing is, as a tree that's loaded uh, it may only have a couple hundred persimmons on it, but every
Yeah.
deer anywhere around knows where that tree is, and they will come check it every day, waiting for them things to fall. And it seems that right around the middle of September is when the persimmons will turn orange, and they'll start to drop. And I mean the ground is just beat down all around those trees. So I set a stand up about 15 yards away from one of them, and got me good access to it, so I don't spook anything out. And but it'll be afternoon only because I figure they'll be in there at night,
Hmm.
so I won't be able to get in there in the mornings. But still, so that's the kind of things I've been doing lately.
Yeah.
Besides
That's
practicing a lot, been shooting my bow every day when the weather
right.
allows.
Yeah, definitely, definitely. That's a huge part of it too. Is that practice? And I went over this past weekend to a buddy of mine's house, and we were kind of shooting around a little bit. And, I'd gone a few days without shooting, and I usually don't do that this time of year. It's usually pretty consistent every other day or so. I'll try to get out and, throw some arrows at the target. But I could really tell just in a matter of just a few days how I guess lacking in confidence I was, just because of,
Mm-hmm.
going that little bit of time without shooting. So I've had to really amp it up here lately, because like I said, we have our season here in Kentucky is going to be starting here in about a week and a half, which by the
Right.
time this episode posts, it's going to already be started. But it's going to be, it's one of those things that the clock's ticking, so you got time to get out and start doing some practice, because if an opportunity comes, you don't want to be lacking that confidence that I felt, even just in practice. So it's
Absolutely.
a matter of,
Absolutely.
making sure you're preparing mentally, of course, preparing where you're going to be hunting and everything, and making sure that you're prepared and ready to go for hopefully an opportunity at an animal.
That's right. That's right. And it's keeping those muscles in shape too.
Yeah.
I mean, it's surprising that if you go out and only shoot a little bit and then you get to your stand and, opening day and a deer comes out and you have to draw and you have to hold it for 45 seconds or a minute.
Yeah. That's a long
You
time with
know,
the bow. Yeah.
it's a really long time. And if you haven't built those muscles up, you're going to be in bad shape,
Mm-hmm.
you know?
Oh yeah.
I learned that the hard way.
Yeah, certainly, certainly. So where's your kind of your journey in the outdoors? Where does it begin for you? And I know you've got a little bit of experience in ministry as well, probably a lot of experience in ministry as well. But where does that kind of where do those two worlds kind of mesh together, and where do those journeys start for you?
Well, is this a 4-hour podcast or what?
Right.
It's an interesting journey, and but my dad was not a hunter at all. He loved to play golf, and so we lived out. We moved in all over the place. And when I was a child, we lived in every state of the South. By the time I was about 12 years old, but we settled in a small town in South Carolina called Saluda, South Carolina, and we lived 12 miles out of town and way out in the country. And I just was bored. And so I just started just going through the farmer's field out into the woods, and I just got captivated by what I was seeing out there, and by the animals and by the sounds and stuff. And I just started reading everything I could read, and I would go to school and get every book on Daniel Boone and David Crockett, because I didn't know where to start. Tyler, I didn't. I
Yeah.
didn't have a mentor. I didn't have anything like that, um, and I subscribed to Outdoor Life magazine. And and while I was subscribing to Outdoor Life magazine, this is really going to date me now. They used to have the Outdoor Life book club, and you would actually mail in a dollar bill to the Outdoor Life book club, and they would send you 10 books for a dollar. You just had to buy 2 books at full retail price within a year.
Hmm.
Well, even as a 13-year-old, I knew that was a good deal, you know.
Yeah.
So
Right.
So I took my little dollar that I made from picking up bottles on the side of the road back then and selling them for a nickel a piece, and mailed it in, and I got 10 books in. And they were hunting the whitetail deer, small game hunting, the outdoor eye, teaching you how to spot wildlife, building your own fishing rods, building fishing lures, um, tracks, animal tracks, tracking and finding game. There was 10 books, and I'm telling you what, I read those things and read them. I would literally take them into the field with me and read and do what it said,
Hmm.
and try what it said. And I didn't even have a gun. Okay, but I remember telling my parents that I wanted a 22 rifle for my 14th birthday, and they got me a 22 rifle from Sears and Roebuck. Is the Ted Williams version, and I still have it, obviously. And I started. It had a scope on it too, and I just thought I was in high cotton, buddy, because I had a semi-automatic that shot long rifle longs and shorts with a scope on it, and it was just a fixed 4 power. And I started without any knowledge, just going out into the woods. No one taught me gun safety. Can you believe that? No one taught me gun safety. No one taught me anything. I just started doing it on my own, and
Hmm.
and I was just totally captivated by it. And I killed a squirrel and skinned it. Still have the skin. All the hair's fallen off now. That's been 40 something years ago. But and then I killed another one. And since that's the only gun I had, that's what I did until I was 23.
Yeah.
So for the first 10 years, all I did was squirrel hunt. That's the only thing I could do. And I got a hold of a Ben Pearson bow, 50-pound draw, has the brackets to hold the little wheels on it, the little 1 inch, 1 1/4 inch
Oh
diameter
yeah.
wheels.
Yep.
And it had cables, like made out of steel cables, you know. And I got some Game Getter arrows from the local Kmart at the time, and some Zwickey broadheads. And I didn't even have a deer stand. I was sitting on the 5-gallon bucket and just walking through the woods looking for sign that I was learning from these books. And I hunted for years before I ever saw a deer because I didn't
Hmm.
know what I was doing.
That's
And then
good
I
that you
bought
kept going.
Yeah, I was either hard-headed or stubborn. My wife would say I'm stubborn. I like to say I'm determined
That's right. That's right. It's a
and
matter of
persistent.
words.
That's right. That's right. So, long story short, I killed my first deer with that bow. It was a little 3-point, but I was tickled to death, and from that point on, I was hooked with the bigger game hunting. And so my first deer was killed with that Ben Pearson bow. I still have that bow, and and so I have not missed a year killing a deer since then.
Hmm.
It took me a while to get it figured out, and this shows how elementary I was back in the day. This was before internet or anything, and I would actually take a notebook paper and draw a map of the area, and I would draw the trails through it. And I'd put X's where I found rubs, or actually an R where I found a rub, and an S where I found a scrape. And I learned by drawing it out. I learned that these rub lines the deer tend to walk these rub lines, and
Yeah.
the scrapes are over here. And I started putting it all together myself, and then reading, and Pat Robertson and Terry Madewell and Jim Cassida, all from South Carolina by chance, and Robert Rourke, and if that's how you pronounce it, and Jack O'Connor. On the sidebar, the two books that I had to buy when I was in Outdoor Life Book Club, I didn't know what I was buying, Tyler. I
Hmm.
bought Jack O'Connor's shotgun book. Who knew that'd be a collector's item at now?
Right.
And I bought um, Pat McNally's fly fishing book. Both of
Hmm.
them are collector's pieces. I had no idea what I was buying at the time. I just had to buy a book, you know.
Right.
So, and I still have those too. So that's kind of my foray into the hunting world, and I have been bitten by the bug hard, and it has become such a part of me that, as I explained to my wife, hunting is not a hobby for me. It's something I must do. It's when I
Yeah.
feel the most alive is when I'm hunting. And I don't care what it is, if you've, which I'm sure we'll get to in a minute about my writing, but I've
Yeah.
I've written before about I don't understand single species people who only hunt ducks, or
Hmm.
who only hunt deer. God, you're missing so much
Yeah.
by doing that. It's a completely different game walking a cut cornfield waiting for pheasants to jump than it is sitting in a deer stand in the southeast. It's a completely different thrill, completely different experience, and I don't want to miss any of it.
Yeah.
You know?
Definitely. I think a lot of those people that they claim to be just a deer hunter, or they claim to be just a duck hunter. I think a lot of it, you know, maybe not all of it, but a lot of it, I think, comes down to just an inexperience with the other species. Because I know
Mm,
for me, whenever I was first getting into it, like my dad, he took me out as a teenager, just deer hunting. We didn't really
mm-hmm,
do a whole lot of other types of hunting, and I think a lot of it was just because dad didn't really know how, so therefore I'd never learned. So once I moved here to Moorhead, like we were talking about earlier, a buddy of mine, he kind of started taking me out, and took me on my first dove hunt, turkey hunt,
mm-hmm.
duck hunt. And, from there, my species of what I want to hunt, it really started to branch out. Now, I mean, it's a year round deal. Like, I mean, you were kind of mentioning how, uh, your wife is, not really understanding it or whatever. But for me too, I feel the same thing, is that, like, whenever I'm hunting, like, that's when I'm most alive. Like, we were right at the beginning of all this COVID stuff. I was getting some cabin fever, just like everybody else, I'm sure. But I was getting some cabin fever, so we just had to get out and do some turkey scouting, like, as a
Mm-hmm.
family, just to get out. And I
Mm-hmm.
think my wife, she could literally probably see the look on my face, like as we were out in the woods walking around, how I just lightened up and how I just felt alive. And she even
Right.
looked over at me and was like, you feel so much better now, don't you? I was like, yes, I feel
Yes.
way better now. Like, we've gotten out, gotten some fresh air, heard the birds
Yes.
chirp, you got out of the house, and it's just a whole different experience. And I think that's something that God has put into our DNA, as our creator, to get out and enjoy his creation and be able
Absolutely.
to see him in his creation.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And you said, I mean, you just took the words out of my mouth, is that when I'm out there, I experience God in such a personal and profound way,
Yeah.
and in a way that being made in God's image is very humbling to me. And
Hmm.
I never lose sight, and I preach to my kids all the time, you are an image bearer, act like one.
Yeah.
Everywhere you go, you carry the image of God. You have God's thumbprint, and He made you like you for a reason. I'm gonna paraphrase Paul here from I believe it's Acts 17. Please, I'm sure I'm wrong in that, but I think that's where it is, when he says that, again, I'm paraphrasing, is that God made you at this time and in this place for a reason.
Yeah.
He put you right here, right now, in 2020, in this place for a reason. And and it's my job to embrace that and to make the most of it. And one of
Yeah.
the ways that I do that is by getting out into nature and experiencing God in his creation, and appreciating him as a creator.
Right.
Does that make
It's
sense?
100%. Yeah, absolutely does. Absolutely does.
Hmm.
I think it comes down to, Romans 1:20, which is just where, let me actually get it pulled up here real quick. But basically, it's that we are, like, without excuse. Like, we have an opportunity to know God because of his creation. Like, we are
Hmm.
in his creation, we can see him. One
So I don't
point,
look
yeah.
it up. I just paraphrase it
Swing it,
really
huh?
bad. That's
Yeah.
what I do.
For since the creation of the world, God's invisible qualities, his eternal power and divine nature, have been clearly seen, being understood from what has been made, so that people are without excuse. And I think that's exactly what it comes down to, is that, you know, we don't have an excuse not to know God, because if you walk outside, look out the window, look at yourself in the mirror, like, you don't have an excuse
Right.
to
Right.
not, other than just pure selfish, sinful nature.
Right.
Other than that, like, you have no excuse not to pursue God, and, go
But
after God and know him more.
did you notice what Paul said there, though? Is that we have the, again, I'm paraphrasing because I'm trying to remember just how you read it from the version, is that we have the ability to appreciate creation.
Yeah.
Um, those deer that walk out in front, they don't marvel at the sunrise like we do,
Right.
right? Those ducks that are flying through the timber, they're not. They're just trying to get on the water. They're
Right.
not. They're not
Try not to get
seeing.
shot.
Exactly. Yeah, and if I'm there, they got a good chance of that. So, but I enjoy trying. I enjoy trying. But we have the ability, because we're made in His image, to appreciate what He's done, not just exist. These
Hmm.
animals that we hunt and that we love and that we find grandeur and beauty and satisfaction in, they don't appreciate existing. They just exist.
Yeah.
But as being made in God's image, we can appreciate and value our existence, which I think is really cool.
Hmm. Yeah, it definitely is. There's a certain level of consciousness that, a lot of these scientists that like to deny God, and they try to find every excuse, that God doesn't exist. That's a question that they really have a hard time answering, is the this consciousness that humans have. And it's something that is, solely present in humans. Like,
Right.
you don't see deer, you don't see, I mean, even elephants and giraffes, and, animals from all over the world. They don't have this level of consciousness that we have. And it's exactly what you were just saying. It's just that image of God that is in us, that
Right.
is just, it's just the outward, I guess, expression of that image of God that we have, is that opportunity to know him because of our consciousness, and be able to know
Hmm.
him because of, being that level of appreciation that we have in seeing him in creation.
Right. Right. Totally.
So
Totally. Yeah.
absolutely, man. So
Yeah.
so as far as your writing goes, we kind of mentioned it there a minute ago. So how much of an influence did your reading, growing up, reading outdoors books and everything, how much of that influenced your desire to get into outdoors writing and to be, somebody who wants to pursue that and write books and be somebody who wants to take words and put them on paper for other people to enjoy them?
Well, Tyler, it's one of those things I didn't really realize that connection that you made until probably 10 years into it, which is
Hmm.
really weird. And I'll get to that in just a second. But I've always loved to write and to express myself through the written word. And I would go on trips I say trips, it may just be right down behind the house, but I would come back and I would relive it by writing it on the computer or by hand back in the day. And it's just something that I did, and with never any intent to share it or much less have it published. Well, to speed the story up here real quick, I was if you remember the North American Hunting Club, you remember that
Yeah.
organization? Yeah.
Yep.
Well,
They
I
have
was a
a
member.
fishing club too, I think.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. I was a member of that way back when, and they had this program in there they called swap hunts. I don't know if you remember that, where it would be like, here you are in Kentucky, me in South Carolina, and I'd say, hey, I got a deer hunt in South Carolina. And you'd say, well, I've never hunted there. I want to go hunt with Pete. So I would
Yeah.
host you. You'd come down here and hunt with me for free. And then in turn, you would host me up there to hunt with you. And
Yeah.
you could do the same species or different species. Well, I got a chance to go to Alaska and hunt moose through that organization. And it was life changing. 3 weeks in Alaska, 10 mile or what was, how far were we? 5 hours from when we left the road, we drove in 5 hours on machines to get to the
Hmm.
camp. And I was fortunate enough to take a moose and met some wonderful people who became lifelong friends. And when I got back, I wrote a story about it, and I wrote a sermon on it. And so um, I sent the story that I wrote to the men that were in camp with me. And one of them, Walter was his name, and he's deceased now, but he became probably the closest friend I'll ever have. He said, Pete, you have a way with words, man. You really need to do something with this. I'm thinking, yeah, whatever. You're just my friend. You're just saying that. He said, no, really, you need to do something with this. So I started just thinking about it. And this was way back in the 90s. And so before internet, well, internet was just in its infancy, but before email, as far as the magazine publishing world came about. So the way I would literally, this shows my college training, go to Books a Million with a legal pad, and I would write bibliographies of the hunting magazines that I wanted to send stories to.
Yeah.
I mean, that's old school right there. And I'd come back and I would type out on my typewriter. I would type out a letter, and I'd write my story, and I'd put it in a self-addressed stamped envelope and send it to them. And you'd have to wait 6 8 weeks to get a reply, and they'd say no. But going back to the persistence, I was
Hmm.
like, so I'd shared the story with some people. Said, man, that's a good story, Pete. You really need to stay at it, stay at it, stay at it. So, and I remember this from seminary, Tyler, where a professor said that you're going to be ridiculed so much in ministry that whenever you get something positive, save it. Create a yes file, he called it, a yes file, because
Hmm.
it's going to be, preachers are under the microscope so much,
Yeah.
and so when you get something that's positive, save it, because when you're feeling down, you're going to need to go to that. Well, I did I did that, and I still do that, but I also have a rejection file of all the rejection letters I got from all the magazines. And then finally, I got a yes from the Rough Grouse Society. Was my first publication,
Yeah.
and it was a story about hunting woodcock, actually. And it sold, and I was just tickled to death. That was in 1999. And then I started selling some stories to our South Carolina Wildlife, our DNR publication. Started selling some stories to them, and it just started growing slowly, kind of like a podcast does.
Yeah.
Started growing slowly, and like a lot of things, I met some people. I actually met some of my writing heroes. I joined the South Carolina Outdoor Press Association, and I met Terry Madewell and Pat Robertson and Jim Cassidy and Jim Mize and people that I have looked up to and read my entire life. And these gentlemen who were 30 years older than me, they are the most unassuming, no ego people that you'll ever meet. And they're like, anything we can do to help you. And they just took me under their wing and just said, here, all right, Pete, do this, do that, and just little things here and there. And before you knew it, in 2018, I sold 136 stories that year.
Yeah.
In 2019, I sold not quite that many, but almost. And so through attrition and time and stuff, you start to build relationships, you start to meet people, and you start to expand and so forth. So that's how I got into the writing. And to your question about the other part, when I met Terry Madewell and Pat Robinson and Jim Cassidy, I had a chance to tell them how their writing influenced me and to say, Terry, I would take your story on hunting early season whitetails. I would take the magazine to the woods with me. And I'm reading it and doing exactly what you said. And he's like, "Oh my gosh, really?" I was like, "Yeah." So my lack of success is attributed directly to you, buddy.
Thanks for that, right?
Yeah, yeah. And so it kind of hit me in those conversations that if they had that kind of influence on me, what kind of influence am I having? excuse, excuse me, or what kind of influence can I have? And so it really changed the way I approached writing to thinking more about the undereducated outdoorsman, not the experienced outdoorsman, but the novice and
Hmm.
the one who wants to learn and really doesn't know where to begin. The kid like me whose dad didn't hunt and I didn't. Both my grandfathers just were deceased when I was very young, so I didn't have a mentor at all. So I started thinking more about that person, and it reminded me of my preaching class in seminary when the professor said the first thing you must do is consider your audience.
Yeah.
And before I was considering my audience being the editor, make the editor happy, and you still got to do that. But now, probably 15 years ago, 12 years ago or so, I started thinking more about the reader as opposed to the editor, and tailoring my writing more to that. And and that's when I started writing books as opposed to just magazine articles and web articles. I started writing books like the outdoor life books that meant so much to me.
Hmm.
I started putting books together to try to help people that want to get into the sport and want to experience the outdoors and try to make it in a way to so that they can benefit from it and so forth. So
Hmm.
that's a long
Yeah.
story. I'm sorry.
No, no, that was perfect. No, that level of persistence, that personal level of persistence is a huge deal that a whole lot of people lack. Like if something doesn't go right, the first couple of times that they try it, then I mean, it's very easy to be discouraged, and be like, that maybe this isn't cut out for me. But
Right.
there's a certain population. I know you're in that population, but there's a certain population of people that just they're amount of drive and the amount of persistence and amount of self confidence, amount of patience that they have in themselves it's above average. And in order for anybody to be successful, I mean, pretty much any successful person that whether it be a celebrity, athlete, writers, hunters, I mean, whoever it may be, they have these stories of personal persistence that they had to overcome a lot of the same kind of thing that you were mentioning there. And who knows, like once you kind of come out of that and you start having some success, you have the potential to be a blessing to somebody else, whether it be in writing where you're considering the reader and you're giving them information that they otherwise wouldn't have, or you're a podcast host, or
Hmm.
you're a pastor, or you have an opportunity to get through that I guess that level of self-doubt and be able to push through that and be able to potentially be a blessing to somebody else. That way you can share this gift that God has given you to other people.
Well, well, thank you for that. I really appreciate you saying that. for me, the hardest thing to overcome is being vulnerable. And I
Yeah.
don't know that I'm rare in that. I think a lot of men are are that way.
Hmm.
It's very hard to expose yourself in your areas of your weaknesses and to be vulnerable, but yet I find it very therapeutic in my writing to be able to do that, to talk about my failures. If you read any of my turkey hunting stuff, you're going to see that I don't kill near as many turkeys as I wish I could,
I'm
or
right
that
there
I
with you.
talk to, or that I call in
Yeah.
ah, I had one this year that gobbled probably 200 times at 60 yards, and I couldn't make him move at all. It
Hmm.
was I tried scratch box, wing bone, 3 different box calls, 5 different strikers on 4 different slates, and that son of a gun gobbled everything I did. He would not move, and it was still a wonderful experience.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah. I
Uh,
had a very similar experience. I had one that gobbled at about 70 yards for about 3 hours, just sitting
yeah,
there. And as soon as there was another Tom that was over the ridge, and as soon as he gobbled, he took off towards him, and that was the end of the story. But
a-
yeah, but regardless though, it was an incredible experience, just like you were saying,
absolutely.
because it was a great learning experience. I was able to sit there and watch him for literally 2.5, 3 hours,
Yep.
just strutting back and forth, and he was just kind of just doing what turkeys do, and I was
Yeah.
able to sit there and just kind of watch him, observe his behavior, and it was a great learning experience.
There's few things more majestic than a strutting tom who's
Hmm.
answering your call,
Yeah.
who's gobbling and responding is uh, I haven't experienced the goose hunts in the fields or the sandhill cranes and that when people can call. I can't call geese at all. I couldn't call with electronic call. I'm telling you, I cannot. I have thrown away so many goose calls trying to learn to blow those things, but I've seen people do it, but I haven't had a chance to hunt with really
Hmm.
good callers. But from what my experience, there's just nothing like a tom gobbling on an early morning and responding to your calls. It is the most remarkable thing, a remarkable sound there is.
Oh yeah, absolutely. It definitely isn't. Just go back to what you were saying before, you're about being vulnerable. I think for anybody who's creating any kind of content, whether it be a book or whether it be writing, whether it be a podcast or anything like that, there's a certain level of vulnerability that
Hmm.
I think you hit the nail on the head. Where especially men, we don't want to show our weak sides. I guess we have this. I guess it's a societal. Maybe it's something that's natural, but it's just something that we don't want to show. That we want to be, of course, viewed as strong, viewed as somebody to look up to in times of hard times. But in reality, I mean, we're people. I mean,
That's right.
and we're just as broken as anybody else is. So that whole level of vulnerability is something that you know men struggle with, and especially the outdoorsmen, the ones who
Hmm.
kind of view themselves as tough guys, as guys who can go out and shoot a buck and go out and fish, catch dinner, and that kind of thing.
Yeah,
There's certain, I guess, a I don't know, maybe an image around an outdoorsman that makes it difficult to reach with the gospel or to reach with ministry. So, what are some ways that being somebody who is in ministry and being, of course, somebody who is an outdoorsman, what are some ways that in your experience you've been able to reach men and women with with the gospel that are interested in the outdoors?
man, that's a really good question, and I appreciate you asking. It really is, because that's kind of the catalyst behind why I started my podcast and some of the speaking engagements that I do is by being somewhat well known in the outdoor world as far as writers and stuff, and been around for a long time and know a lot of people in the industry. Um, and I don't say that arrogantly. It's just a fact because I've been around for a long time. Is
Yeah.
that um, you find that when given an opportunity to speak, people will come because they're curious about an outdoor writer or an outdoor podcast, or somebody who's been on television and stuff before, and so getting them there is usually the hardest part. Tyler, is really the thing. Like if I'm at a wild game dinner or speaking at a men's thing at a church or something of that nature. um but but to your question is, I find that most people who are active in the outdoors have some feeling towards a a being greater than them.
Yeah.
They recognize that there is a God. I think most people that I've come in contact with that spend time any reasonable amount of time in the outdoors, hunting, fishing, trapping, taking pictures, whatever it is, realize that all this didn't happen by happenstance. You know,
Right.
it wasn't a fish crawling out of the ocean and boom, here we are. It was a well designed, thought out plan that a creator had. Whether they call him God, whether they call him the creator, the man upstairs, whatever they refer to him as, I find that most people recognize that there is a God. So that gives me a starting point. I'm not starting with someone who's like an atheist and wants to argue about the existence of God, because you're not going to win that anyway in that arena, whether
Yeah.
it's a
That's a
podcast
whole
or
nother
story.
process.
That's
Yeah.
a whole nother thing, right? So in my writing and in my well, the writing's harder because editors control what gets out there.
Hmm.
In my books, I can do what I want to do. Writing a book is like podcasting. There's no FAA rules. There's no, as long
Yeah.
as you control the content, and so that makes it a little bit easier. And so, what I like to do is be very open about my faith, but very welcoming as well. I just and I got a book coming out next month, which we'll talk about in a minute. And the very last chapter that I put in there is about my faith in God and about why I believe what I believe, why I believe that God is the creator of all, and that at the end of the day is it's we're all made the same. I'm
Yeah.
not any more special than you are. You're not any more special than the guy down the street or the gal down the street. That when God breathed breath into our lungs, he did it with the same care and compassion that he did it to everyone else.
Hmm.
And that at the end of the day, my job is to love as he loves.
Yeah.
Now,
Definitely.
that's hard,
Yeah.
because I'm not as good as God is, obviously, but
Yeah.
my job is to love as He loves. And so, what I try to do when I can get people in an environment in outdoors to try to break down that barrier, um, I find being very subtle works for me. Like I never tell people when I go to a hunt camp, I never tell them that I'm a pastor, never,
Yeah.
because then they put their Sunday school face on. And
Right.
then they start talking in Sunday school language, and you hear King James language come out of people. Where in the world? When did you use thou last
When
time?
did
I
you
mean,
start
come
talking like that? Right.
on. So I never tell them. I never. I want people to be real, and I'm real with them. You know, and so I mean, I don't use profanity around them, and I don't use off color jokes. I don't talk bad about my wife, but I let people be who they are,
Yeah.
and when the opportunity presents itself, then I kind of backdoor it. And then usually by coming in and being a Southern person, you understand backdoors, right?
Right.
And it
Right.
usually has
Yeah.
a screen on it, right? And so if you can get through the screen door, you're in,
Yeah.
right? Right. So
Yeah.
that's my analogy for people out west or whoever's listening to this. The back door in the South has to have a screen on it because we got bugs everywhere.
Hmm.
And if you can get through the screen door, then you're welcomed into somebody's home. And so getting through the screen door is kind of the analogy I use in my brain is I just want to I want to tap on the screen door first, and if I can get in it, then I'll just kind of go wherever they are, you know.
Yeah.
Um, and so that's kind of how I do it, if that helps at all.
Oh yeah, it definitely does. And that whole idea of being real, excuse me, that's something that you see Jesus himself do. Like, I mean, he
Mm.
was eating with, tax collectors and sinners. I mean, that's literally what he did. He, with the Samaritan woman, he was very real. Like, he was there, and he displays his humanity so many times throughout the Bible that like you have this opportunity to be able to see them as a person, and whenever you
Right.
understand them as a person, that's when you can really understand them as God. And that's really, it's incredible to kind of see you were mentioning that little bit of a Sunday school face that people will kind of put on whenever you start talking about the Bible. But
Hmm.
in reality, like it's a book that God has given us. It's his word that he has literally put into paper form so that we can continue to use it. It's all God breathed and all God inspired, and it's something that we can continue to use
Absolutely.
to of course, minister to other people and to show them the truth about who God is and the truth about who Jesus is as the
That's right.
Messiah.
That's right. And it's a living word.
Yeah,
It's not a finite word. It's a living word.
you
And
find
that
something new every time you read it.
it's amazing. It's
Yeah.
absolutely amazing that just the other day, I was reading something. Oh, where was it? Golly, I knew I'd forget it. Uh, you'd think I'd be better at quoting scripture than I am. So much time with it spending it,
There's a
but
lot in it. So,
there really is. Philippians. It was in Philippians
hmm
3 or 4, but it said, "Let your gentleness be full." And I thought I'd never noticed that before.
yeah,
Let your gentleness be full. And I thought, wow. I mean, how many times, why? Because I'm jumping to the verse in my brain to Philippians 4:13 of, I can do all
yeah,
things through Christ who strengthens me. So I'm jumping to there instead of reading the ones before it.
hmm
I'm waiting on that. And in there, I saw, let your gentleness be full. And I thought, wow. I mean, how many times have I read Philippians? I just saw that.
yeah.
And to me that just exemplifies how alive the word is. And so I've been holding on to that and saying to myself, be gentle today, be gentle today,
Yeah,
and it's just amazing how the word never gets dull.
that's very true. Very true. So, kind of switch gears on you here. So, of course, podcasting is something that you do as well. So,
It is.
what exactly is the Christian Outdoors podcast? Kind of give us a rundown. Let's get
Well,
into the
thank you for
details of
that.
that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
thank you for that. As a member of the POMA, Professional Outdoor Media Association, I attended a
hmm
seminar a couple years ago that Michelle, and I always mispronounce her name, Schumerman, was doing on podcasting. I'd heard about it, but didn't know anything about it, but it really intrigued me as a way to get a different message out. When you're writing about hunting and fishing, you're writing about the rut and catching bass over and over again.
Right.
And
Yeah.
and I have this itch to continue to try to spread God's word. Well, about that same time, maybe a year or two before, being a minister, I like to read theology, which for some people just roll their eyes at that. Um, I know, I know, I'm one of those weird guys that likes to read theology, but and I attended a Presbyterian seminary, Erskine Seminary, ARP, Associate Reformed Presbyterian, and so the Presbyterians have catechisms, right? And so I was reading the Westminster Shorter Catechism, and in that, for those who don't know what a catechism is, it's just a teaching tool to teach people about who God is and how God interacts with people. But they use a question and answer format. They ask a
hmm
question and the student memorizes the answer. That's all it is. It's just a teaching tool. But
Yeah.
question one is, what is the purpose of mankind? No, what is the chief end of mankind? I had to put it in their language. That's question one. What is the chief end of mankind? Which is really, what's the meaning of life? Why are
Yeah.
you here? And the answer is, the chief end of mankind is to glorify God and to enjoy Him forever. And
hmm
Tyler, when I read that, I just jumped to the question two, and then it hit me, and to enjoy Him forever. And man, that just really resonated with me, and it was convicting. Those saying the preacher stepping on your toes.
Yeah.
It was convicting to me of and enjoy Him forever. And I thought, well, obviously that means in glory when we're in heaven, but doesn't it mean now? Forever means now
Yeah.
and later. And so I started just questioning myself: do I enjoy God? And so I came up with this. As a writer, I started writing all this stuff down, and hopefully in 2021, the book of this will come out. I'm finalizing the last chapters, and it's going to my editor in the next couple of weeks. But anyway, so I said to myself, well, I recognize God. I believe in God. I love God. I worship God. I pray to God. I praise God. I tolerate God. Let's be honest. I endure God from time to time. But do I enjoy God? And I had to be honest with myself and say, I don't know that I do enjoy Him, not on the way that I think this means.
Hmm.
And so I began a quest to strive to enjoy God today. When I wake up in the morning and I have my cup of coffee and I'm having my quiet time, it starts with, God, I want to enjoy you today. Help me to enjoy you, not just recognize you, not just experience you, but to enjoy you in everything. And Tyler, I got to tell you, it has changed my marriage. It has changed me as a father. It has changed me as a follower of Christ. It's changed me. My friends have seen something. My oldest son, who's moving back from California now, said, "Dad, there's just something different." And I'm like, "Well, I know I put on some weight, but you can be a little more specific, you know." And so Christian Outdoors podcast was a way for me to merge two great passions: my passion for the outdoors and my passion for Jesus.
Yeah.
And so my driving force, or my little, I don't like the word tagline, but it's more of a mission, is Christian Outdoors podcast is where we discuss all things outdoors and how we can enjoy God every day.
Yeah.
And so my goal, Tyler, is to, I bring in guests and we talk about hunting and fishing stuff and we talk about things outdoors, but then we also talk about, how do you enjoy God? Tell me
Hmm.
things that you do to enjoy God. And you're a podcaster. Some guests aren't as open as others, and you
Right.
and that's okay. That is okay. If somebody's just not as um, comfortable sharing their faith as much as others are, that's quite all right. We still want to talk about hunting and fishing and camping and bicycling and well, I really stretched it with the bicyclers there, but uh, backpacking, anything. That was a joke, bicyclist. Uh, but I want to talk about everything outdoors. I'm more plugged into the hunting and fishing world because that's where I've been for the last 20 something years. But I've had nature photographers on there, and I've had
Hmm.
uh, comedians on there. People who they call themselves the hunting and fishing comedian. I had him on there, Darren, whose last name just left me. But anyway, so the main goal is to merge those two passions together. It's what Christian Outdoors is, and we're available on all the podcast platforms. Everyone that's available, then we're on those as well. So we started last October. I do one a week. Comes out every Sunday at noon. So when you're getting out of church, you can turn us on.
On the way
Um,
home, there we go.
there you go. So that's what it is. Thank you for that.
Yeah, absolutely, and that's a lot of the reason why I wanted to have you on, because the Rise Kill Eat podcast and then the Christian Outdoors podcast. Those are, I mean, I feel like we're got very similar audiences, got very similar missions. 'Cause that's exactly what the Rise
Absolutely.
Kill Eat podcast is too. It's just an opportunity for guys who love to hunt and fish and to get outdoors to come on and talk about our faith, and that's
Yep.
exactly what it is. And I think those two worlds, it's so easy for them to be meshed together because of all the reasons that we've talked about for the past hour. It's because we can see God the creator in his creation, and it's something that guys like you and me and all the guests that we've had on our shows, like, it's something that we can all resonate with. And I think that's
Right.
just a testament to the kind of activity that we really enjoy, and the way that we enjoy God, to kind of steal
Absolutely.
your little line there. So
Absolutely. Well, you're not stealing it from me, man. It's from the Westminster Catechism, man. So we just want to enjoy God. I want people to enjoy God, and 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 I have just seen that it really is life changing if you're intentional about that. About God, how can I enjoy you? And I'll be honest. Here, back to the vulnerability. I don't
hmm.
succeed in that every day. Uh, there's some days I get so overwhelmed with working three jobs. Because I work for the USDA is my real job, and then I'm also a full time writer and a part time podcaster, and so it's a lot. And a dad of five children and a husband, and so there's a lot going on. But and sometimes I'm like everybody else. God gets pushed to the margins, as we said in seminary. Instead
Yeah.
of being in the body of the page, he's in the margins. and I just try very intentionally to move him to the center of the page and move me to the margin, and things go a lot better when I do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely more of him and less of us, and
Yes,
that's a much easier said than done. Because I mean,
yes,
we have a a self-centered mentality, but I mean that's the way that we're wired, unfortunately. But it's just shows us how much we need God, and how much we need Him on a daily basis in order to make sure that balance, where real is not a balance, that make sure that ratio stays the way it's supposed to be.
yes, yes, absolutely, absolutely,
Well,
it is.
Well,
So
I appreciate you being on the Rise Elite podcast with me, Pete. I want to encourage everybody listening to the Rise Elite podcast to go check out Christian Outdoors podcast. Be on the lookout for Pete's book coming out next year, and I'm sure you'll give us some updates as far as that goes, and we'll make sure that we share that kind of stuff as the book advances. And
I
I
will.
appreciate you being on.
Well, thank you. But before I go, if you don't mind, I just released an ebook that's
Yeah,
available on all ebook platforms. It's called
awesome.
Planning an Out of State Hunt. 20 steps to success. I know a lot of people are traveling to different states to hunt, and some of the questions that I had when I started doing that was, what do I do first? What do I do next? So I put together a little ebook for people, going back to what I said, trying to make it easy for them. If you
Yeah,
want to hunt out of state, it's a lot easier than you ever thought it was, and it's a lot more affordable if you do it the right way. And I go into all that kind of stuff. And so
awesome.
that came out last week, and I have a print book coming out in October that's called the Hunting Club Bible. Everything you
Okay,
need to know to run a successful hunting club. And so that'll be coming out in October in print form, and the ebook will come a month after that. And so that'll be available on all the, on Amazon and everywhere else.
okay.
And I'm really looking forward to the release of that. So this is the first time I've announced it. So
Oh man, that's awesome.
yeah, the Hunting Club Bible it's a manual. It's not like an enjoyable read. It's a manual. So if you want to know how to start a hunting club or to run a hunting club better, then I go into the legal things. I go into how to write bylaws, how to find members, how to discipline members, how to set fees, how to find land and acquire land. I go to all those steps and how to do that. And so just trying to make it easy for someone who wants to start a club or to make one better, then I have that coming out in October as well.
Well, I'll definitely include those links. I would include the website, the christianoutdoors.org. I'll include that down
Hmm.
into the show notes of this
Thank you.
episode. And Pete, where can folks where can they connect with you on social media?
Well, social media is Christian Outdoors Podcast on Instagram, and also on Facebook. Is that, but also on Facebook I have Pete Rogers Outdoor Writer is on there too. So I have both of those, and Instagram is Christian Outdoors Podcast. So we're on those two platforms, but I don't use Twitter or anything else, just those two. So I
Yeah.
also have a YouTube channel under Pete Rogers Outdoors.
All right. I'll make sure I have all that kind of information on there. So anybody listening to this who wants to connect with Pete and check out his podcast, you guys can access that down into the details of this show. So thank you again, Pete. I appreciate you being on the Rise Elite podcast with me.
Thank you so much, Tyler. I really enjoyed it.
So there you have it, guys. Right there is my conversation with Pete Rogers of the Christian Outdoors podcast. Again, I want to encourage you guys to go check out his show, the Christian Outdoors podcast. Go check out some of his writings and all the content that he's been putting out. I know you guys are going to enjoy it. If you guys enjoyed this episode of the Rise Elite podcast, then go ahead and leave a rating and review on the platform that you're listening on. So these ratings and reviews, they go a long way with being able to organically grow the Rise Elite podcast. So any positive rating and review that you guys feel compelled to give the show, that would be greatly appreciated. Now, I also wanted to remind you guys that the Rise Elite podcast is listener supported. So if you want to help support the Rise Elite podcast as we continue to grow in our efforts to be able to provide solid content for all of our listeners and all of our followers out there, then head down to the details of this show and see how you can support the Rise Elite podcast today. All right, guys, so I appreciate you all listening today, and be sure to subscribe so you don't miss out on any of the future episodes of the Rise Elite podcast. I'll catch you guys next week.